These are notes from my journal made over the last 2 days during a trip south in New Mexico. I arrive at the trailhead parking lot at 5:26 a.m. after an early morning airport run to Albuquerque. I kill the lights, but a sliver moon provides a silvery sheen across the landscape around me. The van chills quickly in the 18-degree morning. I sit in silence, waiting for the dawn. Down the backside spine of the Sandias, settlements scattered and tucked into the hills, valleys, filled with wood smoke. Land grant country, Manzano, Torreon, others. Small towns built back when travel by horse or wagon made resupply a basic survival ingredient. Each town crowned by the centerpiece of church. Still a strong pull in the village life. The challenges of life here in these places isn't easy. The virus comes here in many forms. Generational poverty, narcotics, and lack of industry and opportunity. But yet these places and people endure, most often with undeniable strength and a positivity based in faith, in God and each other. All right, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. The light is completely and utterly blown out. In fact, the light was completely and utterly blown out by 7:30 this morning. So from about 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the afternoon, I'm not going to have good light. That's what happens when you live in the high desert and you have no cloud cover. So right now the light is textureless, it's colorless, it's blown out, it's harsh. There's not a whole lot you can do in these lighting situations. By 7:30 in the morning, the direction of the light and the color of the light are gone. And those are two, for me, for color photography, those are two critical elements that I'm not going to have for the rest of the day. The only thing I can do is hope to find subject matter that's in open shade or areas that are covered, which out here is virtually impossible. And what you do have out here mostly is what I would call leopard light. You have harsh light filtering through things like trees, which are giving you these very strange patterns of shade, and it's very difficult to shoot in that. There's only two things I can do in this lighting condition. The first is to make an image that is so impactful and dramatic based on content. So imagine two hawks fighting, or a hawk fighting a raven, or two hawks mating, or something that you look at and say, yeah, the light sucks, but the content is so dramatic, I don't really care that the light's that bad. Or, and this is something I do all the time regardless of where I am and what I'm doing, the second option is to try to shoot backlit. Now, I went to photography school, and in photography school, they're like, oh, whenever you make pictures, make sure the sun is over your shoulder. Everything, the sun has to be over your shoulder. Well, that's all fine and dandy if that light over your shoulder is absolutely exquisite light. If it sucks like this, then the picture is still going to be horrible with light over your shoulder. If you turn around and shoot back into the light, you will be surprised at what you're going to see. But also it's one of the only ways that you can make decent looking imagery in bad light. And what you're hoping for when you shoot into the light is that you get your subject matter is rim lit by the light coming from behind. Now the photographer that put this on the map for me was Salgado. When I was in photography school and they're telling me light over the shoulder, I was like, okay. And then one day I opened up a photographic book of work by Sebastião Salgado and I was like, wait a minute. What is this? He's shooting into the light. His subjects are rim lit. There's flare coming into the camera. And I was like, well, how come no one told me about this? And so it was like the second half of the world opened up and I was able to find ways of working in bad light. And frankly, I'm in a place that's thousands and thousands of acres in size. I've got terrible light. I've got huge distances between things that I'm looking for. I don't have high hopes that I'm going to come out here and make a bunch of earth-shattering images. I just feel privileged to actually have the time and the resources to be out in a place like this. And oh, by the way, there's exactly one other car out here. It's completely deserted. It's in the 30s, it's windy, it's not optimal conditions, but you know what? Birds don't seem to mind. Something I'm still not used to is filming myself. It may be a bit windy out here, as you can tell. Wind was up by 7 o'clock in the morning, which is a bit odd. Normally you get a little respite in the morning, but for some reason it is raging today. I am in Bosque del Apache in southern New Mexico, south of Socorro, north of Las Cruces. It's a wildlife refuge, a beautiful place, a sparse place, a barren place in a lot of ways. And unfortunately right now it's also a very dry place. I just left Carrizozo this morning and I drove west on the 380 about 60 miles, and just in that little transition you cross two basically hogback small ranges, and just in that transition you increase your water supply ever so slightly. The Rio Grande River is near here. They divert some of that water into Bosque to flood pastures for the sandhill crane migration, which has since passed, although I just saw a lone sandhill crane flying north. And I was like, dude, did you not get the memo? Like, everybody left and went south. The party is south, man. Get down there. So it's a bit odd. So maybe we don't know anything about birds after all. But the world is consumed by Ukraine right now, and deservedly so. It's absolutely crazy what's happening in that region right now. And I've seen some of the most incredible things I can remember in recent memory from the coverage over the past couple of days. So it feels a bit odd to be floating around here in southern New Mexico looking for birds. I have seen tons of hawks already today, which are constantly here because of the food supply. I've seen a lot of mourning doves, which I used to hunt, by the way. Let me explain something which might perturb some people, especially birders. I grew up hunting and fishing, but primarily bird hunting. I didn't do a lot of like big game hunting. My parents did back in the 60s and 70s, deer, antelope, elk, that kind of thing. But I never did that. I was a bird hunter and I enjoyed doing it. Dove, quail, grouse, geese, pheasant, chukar. I've hunted everything at one time or another. In the words of Clint Eastwood, what did he say in that Western movie where he says, I've killed everything that walked or crawled at one point in time. I was not that bad. I would hunt a few birds in the morning, put them in a smoker, smoke them all day, eat them in the afternoon. I enjoyed it, but I haven't hunted in years. I don't really have much of a desire to go bird hunting these days. But birding is very similar. The only difference is you're not shooting the birds, you're attempting to photograph them, which is very different. And I love it, but it's the same kind of feel. And when I capture it with a camera, it actually feels better than it does when I was hunting. So I don't know, maybe I'm getting older, maybe there was a transitioning happening. Before I sleep, a quick check of the news. Ukrainian civilians behind homemade roadblocks throwing Molotov cocktails at a modern mechanized army. The satellite crackles with updates on Russian invaders as American political parties attempt to use the destruction as PowerPoints aimed at the uneducated, the uninformed. Midterms of 2022 and the daunting megadate of 2024 when we decide if democracy still fits our current mood. As the color and direction of light vanish, the van spills out into the land of lava, a black line to the horizon, barren for humans but alive with species, coyote, deer, javelina, and over 100 species of bird. This land was X-rayed by the split of the atom, the weapon thought to be powerful enough to end all war, or powerful enough to end our world. I look at open space, where the mind is free to roam. "26 degrees in the van. Wind up already at 7 a.m. The BBC World Service on the radio. Compared to the American media, the BBC suddenly feels like the adult in the room. The difference is actually both astounding and disheartening. Just their grasp of the English language, a glaring example of how far we in the U.S. have fallen. Journalism as opposed to speculation." So for the past 20 minutes, I've been listening to Liverpool play Chelsea at Wembley Stadium on BBC Radio. Thiago Silva, he senses the danger. He's in the right place at the right time. The Liverpool red, the Chelsea blue. If you can't get up for English soccer at Wembley, I've had goosebumps 20 minutes straight. Who cares about the birds? Who cares about anything else? There's a giant hawk killing something outside the window. Jellied eels for everyone. It's pretty amazing. Thank you, BBC. Okay, I lied earlier. There's not just one sandhill crane here. By the looks of it, let me go off of video back onto stills. Look how slick I am. Yes, there are quite a few sandhill cranes out there still. And I have to say, red-winged blackbirds, in terms of enthusiasm, it's going to be hard-pressed to find a bird that makes more noise more consistently than the red-winged blackbird. And by the way, when their wings are in and they're sitting, they don't look like much. They look like the Toyota Camry of birds. But then they spread those wings, and that red, deep crimson red with tinges of orange inside those wings, I have to say, brings up the adrenaline level. Yes, I just said it, birding and adrenaline, get over yourself. Okay, a couple of observations. Birders, for the most part, old and white. Got nothing, no problem with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Glad these folks are out. There's a lot of things you could be doing. They could be sitting around watching TV. They're not. They're out in nature birding. Also, just passed a Volkswagen Vanagon from probably, by the looks of it, 90s model, which is like every time you get behind the wheel is like rolling the dice. I think I could see the pools of oil on the ground about a quarter mile back. So the odds of them and that old Vanagon making it out of this preserve, I'd give it maybe 30%. So I love the idea of those vans, but the practicality is you might want to be towing a trailer with a mechanic. One of the things that you will occasionally see in this preserve are basically herds of wild pig. In this case, what look like little javelina. And when you're around them, you know, they have a terrible sense of sight, they have a great sense of smell, and the sounds they make, kind of comical. And when they're rooting around and gorging themselves, it reminds me of my friends and I, college, 2:30 in the morning, after just doing horrible things at parties all over the city. We would end up at Taco Bell. Taco Bell had, I want to say, 10-cent tacos, 15-cent tacos, and at 2:30 in the morning, after the kind of things that we were doing, you would eat just about anything. And when we did eat in huge quantities at rapid speed, it sounded almost identical to a wild javelina rooting and gorging itself on whatever javelinas eat. I just thought I would share that. I got the Tesla van, the Dodge cargo van from Tesla. I got it on autopilot. I'm gonna get in the back, maybe do some math. And there's no use steering now. One of the things you'll notice when you're driving around the American West at the current time is that many of the reservoirs that used to be filled are dry, bone dry. And the actual land, the earth itself, has not only passed the point of no return when it comes to being dry, it's actually turned into the first inch or 2 inches of topsoil in some places have almost turned to a silt. And when I say silt, I mean something that is so powdery fine that even with the doors and the windows in the van completely sealed, by the time I get out of this preserve, everything inside the van, my cameras, everything, the bedding is covered in a layer of absolute powdery silt. And I think it's basically, in a nutshell, kind of sums up the situation in the American West right now in terms of the drought. And I think drought is one of those topics that is, like everything else in America now, is a polarizing thing. It's become politicized. We've become politically radicalized as a country. It's pretty basic. Is there water? Is there not water? That's kind of how I look at it. Talk to any farmers and ranchers for the most part, and you will hear a very distinctive story. And this has been going on for decades. I can remember speaking to a rancher in Wyoming in the early 1990s, and he said to me, my future is not in ranching, my future is in selling off the water rights to what I already own. So I think that's what you call foreshadowing. I just heard there's a guy named George Milner who plays for Liverpool. He's the oldest player to do something in something for someone. I have no idea. I have a brother that's playing in the finals, the Chelsea-Liverpool. My guess is his last name is Milner. If it's OR, I'm on the first plane. I'm going over and I'm getting in the luxury box at the stadium because I'm dropping his name. All right, it's still 0-0, Liverpool, Chelsea. I'm exhausted. I'm sweating just by watching it, but it's so cool to hear like Milner this, Milner that. He's a god. His foot's touched by the gods. Believe it or not, I am very under-lensed for what I'm doing right now. I know that seems bizarre looking at the size of this thing. Now, I bought this lens for one story, and this is not it. The story that I bought this lens for, I have not worked on in over a year. It's remote, it's hard to get to, it's a long way away, it requires a lot of time, it requires luck, and I just haven't had the ability to get over there. So, the stories and stuff that I'm working on now, this lens has had a 2x converter on it from the second I bought it. I've never taken it off. And so it really proves to me that I need something bigger and longer than what this is. And I don't know exactly what that is or what it's going to be. All I know is I need it. That was the most insane football match I've ever heard in my life. I listened to the entire thing on BBC Radio. I'm not going to tell you who won. Liverpool versus Chelsea, Wembley Stadium. Do yourself a favor, find it, watch it. Just make sure you've got plenty of emergency supplies on hand, like those defibrillation things, the paddles where you're going to shock someone. You might need it. It was incredible. Dropping out of the high desert into ranchland, sandy, prickly places where the acre per cow ratio creeps up as the water supplies creep down. Mile after mile of unbroken landscape, fenced and owned, but if we hiccup as a species, these places won't work too hard to return to pre-human condition. Water finds a seam in the human psyche. A deep freeze, a thaw, cracks begin, and the planet laughs.